Hello, I'm Kaiser and welcome to Moose Reads. Before I get started, I want to say that the opinions that I give here are my own opinions. They are extremely subjective. If I dislike a book, it is not a reflection on the author and it is not a reflection on people who do like it. Different people have different tastes, and that's okay. Today I will be reviewing A Kiss for Luck by Grace Burrows. This is a prequel novella to her Sweetest Kisses series. It is a contemporary romance. The description says, game designer Sadie Delacourt has moved to the peaceful, bucolic town of Damson Valley for a fresh start where she can keep an eye on a recently divorced sister and her small nephew. Sadie plans to focus on her business and her family until handsome neighbor Gideon Granville turns his focus on Sadie. When Sadie learns where Gideon has been aiming his snooping skills, she's ready to delete him from her plans entirely, though Gideon is all that stands between her and the trouble she thought she'd left behind her. 2 stars. I've read several books by Grace Burrows and loved every one of them. So when I saw this novella was available for free some years ago, I decided to pick it up, despite the fact that all of her other books I've read were Regency romance and this was contemporary. I don't think the shift in the time period was the problem with this novella, though I can't be 100% sure it wasn't a contributing factor. Mostly, I think the problem that I had with A Kiss for Luck was that it really needed to be longer. Because there were so few pages, this clocks in at 148, there just wasn't enough room to get to know any of the characters all that well, or for their relationship to develop organically. I spent the first bit of this book feeling completely off balance, because it felt like the characters kept throwing out extreme non sequiturs that no human being would ever say in that context. Eventually, the ridiculous and hard-to-follow conversations did subside, and I was able to settle into the story a little better, but it was still moving too fast. As far as I can tell, the two decide they're in love with each other after approximately 4 meetings. I think the entire story takes place over the course of a couple of weeks, and by the end he's basically proposed. It's possible that the full-length novels in this series are better, given that they've got page counts to support some downtime, but I'm not planning on reading them. I'm just going to stick with Burroughs' Regency romances. I was also really annoyed by how much detritus my copy of this contained at the back. I had planned to read A Kiss for Luck over the course of 2 days, because I was also slowly moving through House of Gold at the time. So I wanted to read 50% one day and the rest the next. So I got to 50%, and the following day at lunch got through to 57%, at which point the novella ended. So 43% of my copy of this is just other stuff. Specifically, the first chapter from each of the novels in the series. Kind of a tangent, but I'm not all that fond of including a chapter from another book at the end of a book. I understand it from a marketing perspective, but I generally think that if I like an author enough to read more of their work, I'm going to go and find it. If I'm reading a series, either the first book has me on board and I'm going to get the next one regardless, or I've had enough and I'm not going to read the excerpt anyway. Even accepting that including the first chapter of the next book is a reasonable idea, including a chapter from every book in the series, even a series of technically companion novels, is just ridiculous. It's especially annoying when that bonus content takes nearly as much space as the actual content. What do you guys think? Are you for or against preview chapters? Okay. Now I guess I'll talk about some spoilers. And no, I don't count He Proposed as a spoiler in a romance novella. So if you don't like spoilers, now is the time to pause or close the video. For everyone else, let's talk details. The story starts with Sadie panicking because there's a large dog watching her as she struggles to find her keys. The dog belongs to Gideon, and he comes to her rescue, and then in one of the non sequiturs I mentioned, she volunteers the story of why she's afraid of big dogs. This is slightly less of a non sequitur than the one that really grated on my nerves, but it still wasn't really prompted by anything Gideon said or did. She also then invites this complete stranger and his big dog into her apartment where she lives alone. I'm not afraid of dogs, generally speaking, so I don't know for sure, but I imagine that merely being told a dog is friendly isn't enough to dispel a person's fear if they're really scared of big dogs. Also, after this first interaction, she'll barely mention this fear at all, and is increasingly comfortable with what I'm fairly certain she described as a Rottweiler mix. The biggest non sequitur was when Sadie attends a barbecue at Gideon's apartment. This is their second time meeting each other, and Sadie, apropos of nothing, asks Gideon which of his parents was an alcoholic. Apparently, she's analyzed this man's behavior over their 2 interactions and determined that he behaves in a manner common to the children of alcoholics. She's also wrong, which makes the bizarre shift of the conversation all the more uncomfortable. I also felt a little annoyed when we got to the conflict portion of the story. I won't call it a third act twist. The novella's too short to have a proper 3 acts, and given the percentage confusion, I didn't know we were in the third act, and it doesn't actually separate our characters, which is kind of baked into the definition. The source of the conflict is that Gideon, a private investigator, has been hired by a Michael Smith who's been more than a little cagey in their conversations, and turns out to be Sadie's former brother-in-law who hurt her sister so badly she's permanently disabled. He's been trying to get Gideon to locate his ex and son so he can kidnap his child, though he claimed he just wanted to know he was okay. Sadie panics a bit, and she puts a lot of emphasis on her fear that Gideon will get in trouble because he's under contract with the guy, but now actively working against him. She doesn't want him to get sued for breach of contract, and she's sure the guy is vindictive enough to go after him for it. My immediate reaction was that no, he's not under contract. Sadie's sister was married to Hollister Winters, not Michael Smith, so presumably he's using an alias. I'll admit I'm no expert on contract law, but I'm pretty sure you have to use your legal name for it to be legally binding. Eventually, Burrows gets around to addressing this by saying, quote, "He apparently was named Michael Smith at some point," end quote. But again, I feel like that means the contract isn't binding. Any lawyers out there, feel free to let me know if I'm wildly off base here. Overall, this wasn't the worst thing I've ever read. All the same, I didn't care much for it, and don't ever want to read it again. I certainly wouldn't recommend it to anyone else. That's all I have to say about A Kiss for Luck. If you liked this video, I hope you'll watch more in the future. Thanks for watching this one. Bye!